Hello and welcome to Between the Lines, the podcast that introduces you to some of Canada's lesser-known authors and writers who have either yet to begin or have just begun to make their mark on the writing world. In this season, our third, we will focus solely on Canadian poets and their poetry. Some of my guests have already been published, either self or traditionally, while others have yet to take that plunge. I think it is not only important to give each and every one of them an equal opportunity to be discovered, but to be heard as well. I'm your host, Randy Lacey, and I invite you to join me between the lines. Hello and welcome to Between the Lines. On today's show, I will be speaking with Nancy Bell, author of Touchstone. Hello, Nancy, and welcome to Between the Lines.
Hey, Randy. Thank you for having me on.
Well, we just began, so it's not over yet. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the interview, I wonder if you wouldn't mind giving our listeners a brief rundown on who Nancy Bell is and what makes Nancy, well, Nancy.
Well, I am a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a horsewoman. Horses have always been a huge part of my life. I still have one horse right now. I lost my mare of 22 years last August. She contracted Potomac horse fever, which was really kind of devastating because she was a very young 22. She had an easy life, that girl. I write poetry. Obviously, I have two books, actually. One's Through This Door and one is Touchstone. And the horse on the front of Touchstone is actually my first horse. And his name was Brandy. I got him when I was 17, and he's probably the only reason I made it out of being a teenager.
We all have something.
Yes, we do. And I also work with animal rescue with the Alberta Animal Rescue Crew. I'm a foster mom for cats. I used to do dogs, but puppies are just too crazy. So that's kind of, I'm sort of a big mixed bag of stuff. I also write novels. I'm published by a local Alberta publisher. I have, I think, 20 novels currently, and they're available, wherever you buy your books, basically.
Available where all fine books are sold.
Yeah, there you go. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Wonderful. I've got a few friends who are involved with horses in some degree or another. When I first moved to Alberta, an older friend of mine that I was able to connect with in the Linden area, I think she now is somewhere near Airdrie, but she had a horse farm and she bred horses. And she named one of, ponies. Are they called ponies, I guess? Or
well, if they're under 13.2, they're a pony.
Okay. Well, a brand new horse.
A baby, a foal.
Yes. Okay. There you go. Named it after me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So there's a horse out there named Lacey. Do people normally change horse names?
Usually if it's a registered horse, you would have a registered name and then a stable name.
Oh, okay.
So
don't the horses get confused?
No, they don't care.
I don't know anything about horses.
No, it's your tone of voice. It's same as dogs or cats or anything. It's your tone of voice and your body language that they read more than what you actually say.
Okay. And some humans.
Yes, and some humans.
Well, thank you very much for that little intro. Normally at this point or at this junction, I would jump right into question period. But because we're focused on Canadian poets and their poetry, this would be as good a time as any to jump right in. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind reading a poem for us right away.
Sure. This is actually fairly short. I don't write long, massive poems, but it's called Solstice. And it was actually inspired. There's a line of poplar trees that are on one of the roads that I drive by to get home. And this was kind of what prompted this. Solstice. A whisper of white in the wintry wood, silver sifting softly, shimmering snow shifting, moonlight magnifying the memory of trees in the shadows, the bitter breath of the frigid frost borne on the cutting crystal breeze. Moon-woken diamonds glitter in the riddling rime of branches stretched against the pearl-black night, teetering on the tip of beauty, the winter solstice slides down this long night to embrace the light.
Reminds me, of course, there's imagery there, and I was able to put myself in your words. Between Trochu and, one of the many places that I went up north, I always used to stop and take pictures and stuff like that. And it was winter, that frosty, glimmery kind of snow.
Yep.
We were driving and came across a driveway with rows of trees on either side, and it went back off the highway. And it was just a beautiful image. The trees were covered with white. And so that's what that reminded me of. But anyway, thank you for that. And so that was inspired off of a road near you?
Yeah. I drive up it every day.
Okay. Well, I can certainly relate to that. Yes, I used to be able to drive, but unfortunately they frown on visually impaired drivers in Alberta.
I don't understand why.
Well, I don't know. Have you seen the way some of them drive?
I have, actually.
Well, for those listening, and thank you for listening, by the way, in Alberta, a person is only required to have 20/50 vision in one eye to legally drive. Did you know that?
No.
Okay, so if I remove my glasses, I'm legally blind, which is 20/200. I put the glasses on. I joke around that it basically, I put these on and it magnifies what I can't see. But in truth, it brings my vision down to 20/75, which means I'm only like 25 points off of driving legally. And that scares me because I wouldn't want to drive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that poem. Now we'll go right into part one, which I call question period, and ask you a question, because what would a question period be without questions? Number one, how old were you when you wrote your first poem?
Oh my goodness. I have been writing poetry. I was really young. I was in public school, and I'm not saying they were good poems, because I still have them and they were not.
You still have them?
Oh, yes, I do. I have like my composition books from grade 2, well, probably grade 3 and up. And I was writing short stories back then, and a lot of poetry, actually. I started writing poetry before I ever even contemplated writing like a book. So words just come. And for me, it's not, it's more about capturing kind of the essence of a scene or a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I have a girlfriend who writes very long poems, and good poetry, but long poems, but she's always in them.
What do you mean she's always in them?
Well, she'll write like my dog and I in the woods, and they experience whatever they experience. She's a very spiritual person, but she's always in. It's my dog and I, or I, and I very rarely write that kind of poetry. It's more just me outside observing, and maybe that's because I'm an introvert. I don't know.
That's funny. An introvert who's writing about outside. Okay.
Yeah. Well, but I'm not the main focus, right?
Right. Okay. So you were very, very young when you wrote your first poem. What inspired you to start writing so young? Or is this something that you did, or did somebody introduce you to poetry, or? Not
really. No, words just came to me. I know maybe it's a past life thing, if you believe in that stuff. I obviously do, but I had a lady called Ghislaine Douglas, and she was a newspaper reporter way back in the 40s and 50s, and then she moved to British Columbia and lived on Cortes Island, and she wrote many, many tomes of poetry, and she wrote for the Victoria newspaper. She wrote like a naturalist column, and so she was a friend of my grandmother's, and so she mentored me when I was very young. And we maintained a relationship up until she passed away. Interestingly enough, she passed away on Halloween, which is one of the pagan portal days. So it was kind of fitting. That was the day she picked. But yeah, Ghislaine had a very big influence on my life. Probably some school teachers, encouraged me to write. I know in grade 10, we did a thing on Bliss Carman, and his poetry really inspired me as well.
Okay. Do you remember the first poem you ever read that wasn't your own?
Probably Bliss Carman's.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it, but part of it was the bands of Arcturus are slackened and Orion goes forth from his place. The host of the hounds or something leading homeward, the hounds from the chase.
Okay.
I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
Well, yeah, but that you were able to recall that much says something.
I have it somewhere, that poem. And also I can't remember the guy's name, but it's, do not go, I think it's Dylan. Do not go gentle into that good night, rage against the dying of the light.
Mm-hmm.
That was another poem that spoke to me when I was fairly young.
Okay. No, it's, I like Mr. Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
My first poem was grade 5. We got hurtled down to the library where the librarian proceeded to read The Cremation of Sam McGee with such vigor and vim that I couldn't help but being encapsulated by it. She presented it very well.
I love Robert Service. I have all his poetry.
That's one of my very, very first interview when we actually met in person during COVID, and she actually brought me a book that she had gotten up in the Yukon and brought to me, knowing my love of and influence from Mr. Service, Robert Service.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who introduced you to poetry and with what? So we kind of just covered that. So you can either take another stab at that or we can just pass on.
Yeah, pretty much what we've been talking about, like school teachers, school. I've always been like addicted to books. So I read, even when I was quite young, I read books that were kind of, well, what the school librarian thought was over my head, but he was kind of a strange little man anyways. But yeah, just poetry kind of, it just introduced itself to me, really. Like it's something that I can't not do, if that makes any sense.
I can totally relate to that because it just happens, right?
It does.
All right, so I'm gonna swip. I'm just waking up, but I've been up for 5 hours. Okay. I'm going to switch question number 2 and change it up a bit and say, if you could take this opportunity right now to thank anybody for the direction that you've gone with your writing, who would it be? And now's your chance to do it.
Wow. Okay. Probably, all the teachers in public school and high school who encouraged me. Again, that was a long time ago. And honestly, probably, although this sounds really odd, probably my horses. Like they have been my sanity and my friends and my guides. And as an introvert, I mean, I had friends, obviously. I wasn't like the creepy guy with no friends.
They make TV shows based on people like that. Anyway.
They do, yes. And then, they end up being serial killers, which I'm not. But my teachers and, my horses and, I've had a couple of friends that I've had for many, many years. And one of them's Lynn Marie Anderson. And she writes poetry and we've, switched poetry back and forth over the years. And so Lynn and my teachers and my horses, basically.
Okay, that's fair enough. When you write, do you stick to a certain topic, love, nature, death, or do you just write whatever comes out?
Pretty much whatever comes out. If you look at a book of my poetry, there's a little bit of everything. There's usually, I've studied a lot of Celtic myths and mythologies and sort of legends and sort of that esoteric aspect of things, which comes through in my poetry in a lot of cases. Yeah, it's just very whatever comes to mind. Like there's one poem called 26, and it actually talks about standing in line waiting to get into a shelter for the night and being the 26th in line and having the shelter be full when you get to the door.
Oh, I hated that. I mean, sorry.
That was just, we were driving through downtown Calgary one day and there's homeless people obviously everywhere. And I just, it's minus a million out there. And you're like, what do you do if you're, and I'm bad for that with animals. Like, even if I have a full house and there's an animal that needs taking in, I'm always like, well, what if it was me that was the one on the outside of the door? And it's like, no, there's no room. And they always end up coming in.
There's not enough people like you in the world.
Oh, actually, there's a lot of people that are doing a lot of good things right now, but man, the shelters are just bursting, and it's really easy to get burnt out from it.
That there are two words that you included in that statement, right now, but it took things like a pandemic to bring that about. But on a day-to-day basis prior to a crisis, they're not as frequent or as numerous as needed, I think. Anyway, I lived on the streets for 13 years, so so I'm speaking from personal experience.
Yeah.
Who or what is your muse? And I think you're going to say horses, but I'll let you answer.
I would say just nature, the universe, what exists all around us, because that's where I draw from, and that's where things are kind of gifted to me, if you like, by my muse. And my muse can be very demanding sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
When I was writing my first novel, it's not poetry, but when I was writing my first novel, it would actually wake me up in the middle of the night. And it'd be like, you either get up and write this down or you're going to lose it. And so I would be at, 3 in the morning. And at the time I had a very catastrophic accident with a piece of farm equipment. And so I was kind of going crazy because I'd gone from 150 miles an hour to 0 in like 1.2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like stuck in bed for like 14 weeks on crutches, and it was horrible. And so I had started reading a bunch of poetry again and other things that I'd always wanted to study and never had time. And so this book grew out of that, but it would literally wake me up in the middle of the night with dialogue and narrative. And you probably know this yourself. If you don't get up and write that down, when you wake up in the morning, it's gone, and you can't recreate it exactly the way you can't recreate that magic that was there at 3 in the morning. So I'm always, when I do that, I'm always unhappy with what comes out because it's not that magic moment, and I know that sounds weird, but
no, well, to somebody like me, it makes perfect sense, but what's that say about me? No, you're absolutely right. Cause, the other day I'd gotten up too early and I went to have a nap before doing something that would have required a lot more energy than I had. And I'm laying there and all of a sudden, this thing popped into my head and I'm trying to fight. No, I want a nap. But I knew if I didn't write it down, it would be gone.
Yep.
And, how many poems would you say you've written in your lifetime then?
Oh my Lord. Hundreds.
Oh, come on. Don't be modest.
Oh, maybe thousands. I have I did April poem a day a few years. I haven't done it lately, but I should do it again this year because the end of April comes and you've got 30 new poems. And so I've done that a few years, and you just write. You just can't not do it. So there's some of them are short, some of them are a little bit longer. There's like a really short one I wrote when I was in a spare in high school in grade 11, I think it was. And it was like, each year I cannot help but wonder at the miracle of spring. That's it.
Who said they had to be long?
Yeah. And it's yeah.
No, I was going to say in New Year's Eve 2014, like going into 2015, I made a New Year's resolution to try and write a poem a day for a year. And I'd done it. I tried to do it the year before as well, but failed miserably and frustrated with myself, whatever. But after 13 days, I failed again. But I went back and I looked at the poems that I had written in those 13 days, and I had more poems written than days that had elapsed. And then I went, well, wait a second. What was I really trying to attain? And I redefined the resolution to fit the goal that I was really after, which was to have 365 poems by the end of the year. And then on November 21st, before I went down to the Dominican Republic, I had achieved 365 poems.
Oh, congrats.
Well, and that's what, and then 4 years later, I published 4 books out of them, which is my resolution series. But anyway, so yeah, they just come, and sometimes they're from within, sometimes they're from without. And if you don't write them, they'll never be there.
Exactly.
So with that said, do you have another poem for us?
I do.
I knew that.
Yeah. This one actually is kind of a Celtic-y one. The she, it's spelled Sidhe, is actually like the fairy realm in Ireland.
Okay.
And they live in fairy raths and stuff. So it's kind of, if you know, are you familiar with Thomas the Rhymer?
No, but I will be after today.
He meets, he's a bard, I think. But anyways, he meets this lady on a white horse, and he follows her and tries to catch up with her. And eventually he stops, and she comes back and says, he says, why didn't you wait for me? And she said, well, why didn't you stop earlier? And then she takes him, she's a fairy queen, and she takes him inside his wrath. And then he shows up, much later. And that's kind of the Thomas the Rhymer is the story anyways. So this is called The Land of the She. They say once you have been to the land of the She, you return either mad or a poet who spends the rest of their days pining for the shining lands to which they can't return. They say the food is exquisite, the women beautiful, the men handsome, there is no strife or want, and the horses are magnificent and swift. The returned wanderer longs, they say, for the heart friends they made in the shining lands, for the intangible something that is greater than anything this mortal world can offer. The poets pour their angst out in letters on paper, their heart bare for all to see. They die, sorrowing for the lost wonders, clinging to the magic that hides in the folds of their clothes. The mad ones speak of marvels and heroes who have no place in this world, holding in their fists ordinary pebbles and rocks, assuring you that they are diamonds and rubies. The mad ones withdraw into the shining lands, leaving the husk of their body in the mortal world, too mundane to contemplate, when the fare of fairyland is so sweet on the plate. When they pry open the lifeless hands, they find diamonds and rubies clutched in them. Inside the poet's notebook on the lined page are written words that gleam with gold and shimmer with silver. They say that you have been to the land of the She, that if you have been to the land of the She, that you return either mad or a poet, and that you die sorrowing for the shining realms to which you can't return. And that's that one.
That reminds me of other things that I've written that I love that world. I really do. And so when I hear things that go into that world, into that realm, I just find myself drawn in. I forget myself. So, and that's why I kind of hesitated and didn't respond the way that I did. But how did that inspiration for that come? Don't hate me.
No, it's fine. It was just, I wrote it when I studied for 7 years under a lady who's since passed away, studying the Celtic, sort of like the Red Book of Lacan and the Yellow Book of, can't remember the other one, but there's a bunch of sort of the Irish myth cycles. Mm-hmm. And so we were studying those, and a lot of it involves, not just the cut and dried kind of dusty studying the stories, but looking behind the words and finding the magic and finding what's there, and then doing a bunch of meditation on whatever is coming into your mind from these stories and things. And so that's what came out of there. And it's kind of, I don't know, if it depends what people believe, but if there's more worlds than just this world, and there's a world, just on the other side of the veil that we could walk into, and there's all kind of marvels there and different things. And it's just kind of nice to sort of entertain those ideas without, getting locked up somewhere.
Which is, you hit it on the head. I mean, we can entertain those ideas. We can present them in such a way from this side that people can either understand, believe, or whatever it is they choose to do. But without that gift of being able to write a poem, song, sonnet, lyric, or whatever, we can't really glimpse into those other worlds, can we?
No.
Yeah.
No. And sometimes you feel like when I'm writing, I feel like I've got a foot in both worlds. Like I'm kind of, channeling is the wrong word because that has a bunch of weird connotations, but it's more like it's just gifted. Sometimes the whole poem just comes and it's gifted.
Absolutely. So have you ever just been given an entire poem at once, or does it come in bits and pieces, spurts, or how does that work for you?
It usually comes in one chunk. I took the dogs for a walk one day and came home with a poem.
Yeah, I know that very well. I take a walk to the grocery store. I count my steps. I do a lot of counting, being visually impaired. So, and I've got so many that, I've 435 steps to the grocery store, and I've comprised this big, long, or walking around my house, it takes, whatever amount is, and it's there. And I like to say that, the ether we grab whatever we can from the ether to make it ours. Yes. Otherwise, who's going to end up with it? We never know. It might never get snatched. So.
No. And I think sometimes I feel like the idea or the essence wants to manifest, and it does it through us.
That's a good way to put it. I might have to use that.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is the hardest part of writing a poem for you?
Not editing it to death.
Oh, really?
In one of my books, I kind of had got some, advice. Well, you write a lot of free prose, and if you rework these couple ones and, introduce some rhyming patterns and stuff. And so I did. But, honestly, the way the poems came out the first time is, in my heart, is truer and how it should be. And when I read the ones that I reworked, it jars me. And I mean, other people don't, because they've never seen the original. It doesn't, they're like fine with it. But to me, it jars me. So editing, I have to sometimes have to stay true to what I know in my heart. And, it's nice to have critics and it's nice to have feedback.
I'm kind of laughing here. You're probably seeing me laughing and stuff.
Yes.
There's a reason for that, because you touched on something that I believed for decades. And until I lost my vision, I never even contemplated editing a poem. And it was only after I lost my vision, I took a course through the Hadley School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And it was called Elements of Poetry. And my instructor, she says, take something that you've written a long time ago and edit it. And my first thought was, you edit poetry? Because I always believed that the way it came out was the way that it was intended to be, which is what you just said.
Yeah. And I totally believe that, because I have regretted reworking those poems ever since, and I don't do it anymore.
Really? I know you might clean up the spelling and stuff like that, but
yeah, that's what I was just going to say. It's not to say that I don't go over them and make sure everything, looks the way it should and kind of flows the way it should. But I've just never been kind of a in the box girl. Like a sonnet has to do this and this and this, and a setsina has to do this and this and this.
Look at you using words like that. Oh, I feel so cool. No, I do. I have files in my computer for sestinas. I have for sonnets. I have for various other forms of poetry. And then there's just what I write, because I like to try other styles, but I always come back to me.
Yeah, me too. And I've done the same thing. I'm kind of like, try this or try that. And yeah, it works, but it's not, the magic isn't there.
So again, with all the different styles and formats of poetry. Have you ever tried to create your own style or format, or?
Not really, no. I just
No?
kind of, yeah.
Well, I mean, you see poems that, okay, I wrote a poem called Form or Function. And basically it was one word, two words, three words, four words, made a triangle and then a reverse triangle. Right. So that's form,
Oh, cool.
right? Do you ever do things like
Right.
that?
I haven't, no. It's kind of interesting though, to do stuff like that. Cause I know people who do kind of how the words of, like, Renee Saragina does that, where the way the words are on the paper is actually part of the function and part of the magic of the poem. And
Yeah.
she's very good at that, actually. I haven't done that a whole bunch, no.
I wrote a poem called Cross Purposes, and it was, in the form of a cross. I'm a man of faith anyway. That's why I
Mm-hmm.
did it. But everything was,
Yeah.
and it laid out, it looked like a cross. I like to play with things, play with words and
Mm-hmm.
forms and functions. And I don't think, I don't think that poetry should be limited or set to anything that can be taught. I don't know if that made sense now, but you know what I was trying to say, right? It's,
Yeah, I do. I do.
as we write it, that's the way it's meant to be, basically. So, and there's a place for the sestina and those
Mm-hmm.
formats and stuff like that. But I think as the muse dictates, we need to listen.
Yeah, I just sometimes poetry seems like river or water, and it just kind of goes where it needs to go.
It meanders, yeah.
Yeah, and it often takes the path of least resistance, but sometimes it just kind of flings itself off the cliff too.
So you said that you don't typically write longer poems, so like Beowulf and the Rime of the Ancient Mariner or those kind
Yeah.
of things. But what's the longest that you've ever written, words or pages?
Oh, probably the one that I read, The Land of the She, or there's another one I wrote called Henge. They're probably the longest I've written. I'm not an epic poem writer.
Do you think the epic is dead?
That's a hard question.
You're welcome.
I don't know personally anybody that's writing like epic, the ideals of the king, like Tennyson,
Right.
anymore. But I don't think it's dead. I mean, they're still being read, even, centuries after they've been written and decades after they've been written. Some of them that they're still being read and they're still obviously must be appealing to people. I just don't know. I don't personally know anybody that's writing that. Are you awesome?
I try to. I actually I documented my entire life in a poem, and it's like 10 pages long,
Wow.
all rhyming.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I
It's
bow
in
to you.
it's in book 4. It's called, My Life. But yeah, it's in book 4 of my resolution series.
Wow.
Again, it's not your typical epic, because there's usually a hero and
Mm,
whatever, but this was anyway, that's neither
yeah.
here nor there. Is poetry dying, or do you think there is still something, or do you still think there's enough interest in poetry to keep writing it? Clearly you do, but
Yeah, I do. Well, I couldn't stop writing it if I tried, but
yeah.
but I don't think it is. I know last year we did When Words Collide online, and there was, I think, 3 poetry workshops or sort of sessions,
Mm-hmm.
and they were well attended.
Now, what is When Words Collide?
It started out being probably about 12 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. It started out as a sort of like a sci-fi writers readers festival, and then it evolved and it became for $50 a weekend for the weekend in Calgary here. You could come, and it was at the Delta Hotel on McLeod Trail in Anderson, I think, whatever that one
Okay.
is. And they took over the whole place, and there were just any kind of workshop you could think of in all the genres, fiction, nonfiction, poetry. And then, of course, COVID hit. And so it's been online for the last 3 years. And this year it's always in August. And this year is actually going to be the last one.
Oh no.
The same people have been running it forever, and I think they've just kind of burned out, which is understandable because it's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, but they had a 3-year break.
Actually, you know what? The Zoom online thing was way more stressful because it took way more coordination and way more, and then you've got all the technical crap that people were having trouble with, video and sound, and then we had trouble with some Zoom bombers the 1 year, which was really unpleasant to say the least. But yeah, it's When Words Collide is amazing. They do have a YouTube site, and a lot of the older sessions are on their YouTube site
under the title of When Words Collide.
When Words Collide. So if anybody's interested, they can go there. The poetry workshop should be there, as well as, all kinds of them. They've had all kinds of, I think Terry Brooks was one of the keynote speakers last year.
Like the author Terry Brooks?
Yes.
Yes. I have all his books in audio.
Yeah. Yeah. Terry Brooks was there. Diana Gabaldon has been there different years. Jack White was there in the early years.
Jack White?
Yes. Unfortunately, we lost Jack.
Are we talking the same Jack White that lived in Victoria that came over from Scotland?
Yes, Jack White lived in Kelowna for the last years of his life. Yes.
Really? So that was the Eagles Brood series? And...
Yes. Yeah, all of those. He was an amazing.
I know what I like.
He's an amazing storyteller. Did you ever get a chance to listen to him in person?
No.
Oh my God, he could raise the hairs on your arm.
Really?
He was talking one time about, sorry, we're digressing a bit here, but he was talking one time about when he was doing his research for the Brood of Eagles series, that whole Skyblade and Skystone and all those. Mm-hmm. And he said, when they used to make swords, the blade and the handle thingy, whatever you call it, he knew what it was called.
Yep.
Was kind of lashed on. Mm-hmm. And he said, it came it was like a bolt of light hit him. And he's like, they made a mold, and he goes, when they took the sword out, it would be all one piece, so it was strong. And he goes, Excalibur, and I guess that means in Latin or something, whatever it meant, but it was like, that was how the sword got its name, basically. Mm-hmm. And it was just, I don't tell it obviously anywhere near the way Jack did it, but it literally raised the hairs on your arm when he told it. Like, he was just an amazing person.
I thought that whole series was an interesting perspective on the whole Merlin and Arthur twist. Just fantastic. And of course, Mary Stewart, was it Mary Stewart?
Yes.
The Crystal Caves, right?
Yep. The Crystal Caves.
Yeah. I grew up reading all that stuff.
Yep. I did too.
And, actually, 20 years ago, I came up, this was long before I even considered writing anything other than poetry, because that's basically all I've ever done. Mm-hmm. Was writing a book, because the legend says that Merlin has been entombed in a crystal cave.
Yeah.
And he's just been woken up in this current century, and he's in search of the reincarnation of Arthur and stuff like that. Anyway, I've yet to pursue that, but that's an idea that's been in my head for decades.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even when Princess Diana died, they talked about that legend, because she was buried on the island in the lake. Mm-hmm. And there was some press somewhere was spinning it as the Lady of the Lake. And
oh my goodness, are you serious?
The whole deal, and William being the reincarnation of Arthur. And I was like,
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I know. I was like, that's kind of stretching it a bit.
Well, they reach for heroes in anything, don't they?
Well, I guess, yeah, but I'm not quite sure what the British tabloids are reaching for anymore.
Well, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
So were you done with that answer? We did digress. So you say poetry is not dying.
No, I don't think it's dying. I think there's a lot of people still writing it. A lot of people reading it. If you go to an independent bookstore, or you go to Chapters, there's poetry books on the shelves.
I guess what I was after with that question was, so poetry has reached levels of popularity throughout the ages, right? So like you go to the Renaissance, poetry was probably at the height of its crowning glory. And then it dipped in popularity and it's resurged and it's done that whole roller coaster ride.
Mhm.
Where on that roller coaster would you say it is today? Is it at its lowest or is it resurging to that top?
I think it's starting to resurge a bit. I mean, Calgary now has a poet laureate.
Is that something new?
Canada, I think so. Canada has a poet laureate, whatever, in Ottawa. I think it's still relevant.
Okay.
I think the internet in some ways and the way the world's become smaller has helped in a way, but I think it's also hindered it in a way as well. Like it's kind of the internet and sort of that mass availability is a double-edged sword in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And it's, yeah, because with KDP and different things, like anybody can publish basically whatever they want. And some of it's not that well, and it's not that the writing doesn't have merit, it's that it hasn't been prepared correctly.
True.
And so it takes away from what's actually there.
Now you're talking about my books. I'm not kidding.
No, because my poetry books are self-published. My goodness.
Have you ever been traditionally published or are you content with self-publishing?
Yes. No, actually, I have been very lucky. I had a poem, it was actually Henge, was accepted into a book called Tamaracks, which was
I read that in your
Tamaracks,
bio.
Canadian Poetry for the 21st Century, edited by James Deal, who's in Sarnia. It was published by somebody in California. So I was very surprised actually to get included in that. I was like, woohoo. And then I had some poems in a book that was Vistas of the West, which basically was a lot of cowboy poetry and Western poetry. And my very first poem was published in the Scarborough Mirror which is kind of an outskirts of Toronto, when I was in like grade 9, I think.
Okay.
So I've been very lucky that way. And I was like really thrilled to be included in Tamaracks. And then also a bunch of my poetry is included. The University of Holguin, I'm not sure if I said that right, in Cuba has a Canadian literature program, and my poetry is included in it. Miguel Angel Olive Iglesias is the professor there.
So I read that in your bio and I was going to ask you, where do you find these opportunities? Were they just dropped in your lap or?
That one was actually courtesy of James Deal from Tamaracks. He and Miguel are colleagues, and he basically said, "Hey, Tamaraxers, he's looking for Canadian poetry. Go ahead, send him whatever you feel he would like or that you would like him to read." And so I did. I mailed him, and it took like 3 months to gather. I mailed him my 2 books. And we correspond via email now, thank God, because it doesn't take three months to get him anything. But that literally was courtesy of Tamaracks and James.
Excuse me. So. That's I read that and I went, we need to hear about this, because I don't think there's I do not think that there is a whole lot of opportunities. You've got your standard magazines and journals and stuff like that are accepting, but opportunities like that don't come every day. And there's got to be a better way.
Sharing. We have to share with each other. Absolutely.
And that's why one of the reasons why I created my group, Canadian Creative Writers. What kind of a guy am I? I forgot my own group name. It's been one of those days. So I'm going to turn this into a 2-part question. So who do you write for? And the other one is, what do you write for?
I would have to say, honestly, I write for me.
Okay.
I don't write for anybody else. I write for me because I have to, because the poems are basically gifted to me. Like I can sit down and decide, okay, I'm going to write a poem about whatever is inspiring me at the moment. But for a lot of cases, they kind of show up and I have to sit down and write them. What was the other part? What do I write for? Or...
Yeah. What? Like, do you write for fame? Do you write for fortune? Do you write for...
I wish. No, I just write because I have to, because I can't not. I don't, I'm basically an introvert. So I'm really, when I get up in front of, a group of people to talk or I used to teach writing lessons and I had like 70 or 80 students over the course of a week. And it was a different me that got up there in front of them. It wasn't, the me that writes poetry that kind of hides somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely, it's not for fame, and I don't know about money because that hasn't come my way. So it's not for that. I think it's for the process. It's for want of a better way of expressing it, it's for birthing the poem and sending it out into the world. Because once I've written it, it's kind of no longer mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's everybody who reads it, and everybody who reads it probably gets something different out of it because they come from a different space than what I do.
So would you say like poetry is like artwork? It means something different to everybody?
I think so. I think it does. Like, I think people pull different things out of it. The same as when you're writing a book or a novel. I remember Jelaine saying to me one time that you didn't meet the poet or the author in her living room. You met her through her books, through her written word. And I think that's very true. We expose inner parts of ourselves when we create our characters or we create our poetry that we wouldn't normally express in everyday life, like in a conversation.
One of the questions I often ask as well is how much of yourself is in everything you write? Is it just a little, or is there more than a little? Can people clearly see you in what you write, or do they have to, pardon the expression, but read between the lines? Not to throw the name of the podcast out there, but do you know what I mean?
I do. Honestly, whatever I write from the heart. And so, yeah, I'm in whatever I write, whether it's, poetry is sort of encapsulated more in a book. You're sort of spreading yourself out more because you're creating a cast of characters. In a poem, it's just whatever is there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's us, it's me, it's there.
So there's an expression that most writers are very familiar with, is write what you know. Have you been able to write a poem that's got nothing to do with anything that you know? Do you know what I mean? Because like I've written poetry and I've shared it with people and their immediate response was, you poor thing. And it's got nothing to do with me or anything that I've experienced.
Probably 26, that poem 26 I was talking about earlier would be the closest to that.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I've never been homeless. Thank God. But again, getting a little bit into the esoteric stuff, I am an empath. Like I can feel other people's emotions sometimes, or other people's sort of turmoil. And so I can relate to it in a way but not, obviously not in the same way as if I had experienced it.
Exactly. No, I understand what you're saying. There's two expressions that I have. I believe they're my own, that I truly believe. And the first one is in most of my books, and it goes like this. I do not necessarily write because I have something to say, but rather because there may be something you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is I do not write for profit. I profit from writing.
It's very true.
Right? I'm not in it for the money. But when I write, the experience for me, I think, broadens my horizons and therefore I profit from it.
Yeah. All profit doesn't have to be measured in dollars and cents.
Well, the world will tell you differently.
Well, yes, I know it will, but especially when I'm trying to pay my bills.
Wonderful. So, every interview that I've done, there's been, 7 questions as a rule because it generates so many other questions after that. But there is and now for the mysterious, unannounced 8th question.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready for it?
Sure.
You can have a choice. You can either have a serious one or a fun question.
Oh, I don't know. Let's go serious.
Let's go serious? Okay. I gotta find it here. How do you think the Canadian literature, or how do you think the Canadian literary community supports and promotes poets?
There is the League of Canadian Poets, which, does what they can do within their parameters. I don't know that as far as like grants and stuff, there's a lot of government funding for poetry. It seems to be more focused on, literary fiction than poetry. I think, does the CBC have a poetry?
They do have a poetry.
So that's part of it. But I don't think there's a great deal kind of focused on poetry. I think it's more like literary fiction novels that they focus on, or magazines from what I've been able to find anyways.
Right. But I mean, like, you've got your Alberta's Writers Guild, you've got,
yes.
And they've all got their own. Do you think that they're involved with the aspect of poetry on equal terms with literary fiction?
No, I don't think so. I think, and maybe because there's not as many poets, or there's not as many of us sticking our head up out of the little mole holes. I don't know. Well,
I think as a result of the pandemic, there were more people writing poetry than ever before.
That's probably true, because they were kind of trapped in their houses.
And they needed an escape.
An outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably true. And maybe that will, because really the pandemic just kind of ground to a slithering halt there not that long ago. And maybe that will translate in 2023, 2024, 2025 in a bigger uptick in the
as poets, though. I mean, how do we encourage or push these guilds or fellowships or whatever societies? How do we push them to put us on equal terms, or can we?
Yeah.
Or should we?
Well, it would be nice,
wouldn't it?
But I don't. Do you know of any sort of, like, I know lots of writing groups, but most of them are focusing on writing, not poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I think if there was enough sort of grassroots groups of poets that got together and sort of lobbied, either the federal government or your provincial governments to support poetry in a larger way, I wouldn't say a better way, but a larger way, that might be the route to take. But it would take somebody organizing those grassroots groups together to form a unified voice. Because if we all just kind of, this group did their little whatever and this group did their little presentation, I think one unified sort of spear would work better than a million little darts.
So you brought up like the CBC writing contest, and they do have a poetry contest, and they have a nonfiction, and they have a fiction contest. And I don't mean to pick on CBC, and that's the only example that I have off the top of my head.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm probably gonna, if anybody from CBC actually listens to this, I'll probably get in trouble. But I've noticed that the majority of the winners from these particular contests are marginalized people or immigrants and I don't think that's fair to the rest of the poets.
No, it's not. And
the writers.
That has been a trend in the last few years for sure.
Yes.
And I'm going to get myself in trouble here too, so we'll be in the same vat of hot water.
Woohoo!
I have seen poetry contests and writing contests as well that are only for BIPOC or Indigenous people. Now, if I went online and posted a poetry contest that was only open to white people, I would be frigging crucified.
Yep.
And yet it's okay for the reverse of that. And I do have an issue with that. And yes, I just opened myself up to get flamed all over the world. But truth is truth. And
yeah, if you have any complaints or anything, send them directly to my podcast and I will deal with you.
Inclusiveness is inclusiveness. It's not selective exclusiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening.
Yep.
It is what's happening. And those of us who are now becoming the marginalized, if you want to use that term, can't open our mouths without being accused of horrible moral things.
Or labeled, yes.
Yes. And so I tend to, not express my views on that, but apparently I've decided to break my silence.
Well, good for you, and no better place than here because I don't think a lot of people listen to us. I'm kidding.
I'm safe.
But so the whole premise of my show is focused on Canadian content only, right? And I thought for sure that was going to get me into some hot water, but you know what? Especially because I want to deal with lesser known Canadian, because I believe that, the big five are pushing an agenda with who we should be reading. Read this. This is the best out there. And I've read it and I'm going, no, it's not. I've read people in my own writing group that are far better than that.
I know. Well, you always want as a poet, I think, on your CV, if you want to be recognized by kind of that CBC sort of group, I was published by the Malahat, or I was published by the Fiddlehead. And honest to God, I have read the stuff that gets published in those, and I don't want to write that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to write that because it's all angst and dark.
There's a place for natural angst.
There is, but that's all that I seem to see in those publications.
Well, a lot of it is contrived angst too, though.
Well, yes. And mind you, I haven't looked at them recently. So that my opinion is based on, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But I don't want to write that. And if that's what I have to write to get published there, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I think, that's why I created this podcast. That's why I created my writing group. Cause I was on the Facebook Canada Writes, and in there I was censored so much. I would say something and this is a writing group. Let's talk about writing. Let's not talk about, apartment housing in Toronto that's lacking. That's got nothing to do with writing. And, and then I got shut out. So, I created my own group. I've got like almost 1,500 members and all we do is talk about writing and share writing. Writing. That's all it's about.
And that's what it's supposed to be about.
You're in my group, are you not?
Yes.
Yes,
I am.
You are. I actually checked this morning. Well, the interview I had yesterday, she wasn't in the group, so I sent her an invitation. Come on. I'm going to ask you the fun question anyway, because it's just fun.
Okay.
If I arrived at your residence in my time machine and I said, "Hey, Nancy, get in. We're going," when and where are we going and why?
Oh, let me think.
Especially if it has something to do with inspiration for your writing.
Okay. So we are going to Cornwall.
Ontario.
No, England.
England, okay.
We're going to Cornwall, England. Way back when they were building those stone circles and monuments, because I want to know what their actual function was, because I have my ideas.
And how they did it.
That's where we would go, because then if I knew that, then I would figure out how Avebury became, and Silbury Hill, and Stonehenge.
Okay, I'll take you there.
Okay.
That's really good. I've had many different answers to that. One of the ladies said I'd go to that concert in 1969 somewhere upstate New York, and oh yeah, Woodstock. I never thought of that. There's been some interesting answers to that. What advice would you give someone who says that they can't write a poem to save their life?
I would say everybody can write poetry. Everybody can write poetry. We are magic. We are, as human beings, we have the ability to create. And everybody has it. And whether you've buried it deep inside or whatever, it's there. And all you have to do is just start writing, put words on paper. It doesn't matter what it says. Put words on paper and keep writing, and eventually it makes sense.
Here's the easiest way that I found that people who say they can't write a poem can write a poem. How many people do you know who sing songs and make up their words as they go?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's an interesting website. It's called kissthisguy.com.
Okay.
And it's misheard lyrics.
Oh.
It's quite the website. And yeah, but people make up their own lyrics all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's what they think it is, or they change them because they're singing it to their kids or whatever. But
yes.
They make them up. And so, yes, they can write poetry.
Yeah, everybody can write poetry. You just have to believe in yourself and open your mind and
Well, Mr. Hollingsworth, my grade 9 teacher at Woodruff High School in Ottawa, mm-hmm. We came to that section of the curriculum where we're dealing with poetry, and he announced it to the class, and we all went, writing poetry, not reading. And he says, your assignment is to write a poem for next week. And, much to the chagrin of everybody, blah, blah, blah. I went home and I wrote 3 poems, like bang, bang, bang. And I didn't know which one to hand in, so I handed in all 3.
Yeah.
And Monday morning, he graded, he had the papers, and he called me back after class. He says, I want to talk to you. And I said, okay. He says, did you really write these? And I went, well, yeah. He says, well, they're actually kind of good. And they remind me of, and he named a musician. He says, they remind me of this person's early stuff.
Oh, cool.
And I went, oh, that's cool. And he says, I'm encouraging you to continue writing and maybe one day get published. Now, that took 33 years for that to happen because life and everything else got in the way. But I continued to write throughout the whole thing. So anyway, everybody I think can write, has it in them to write a poem.
Yep, they do.
All right, we're going to go into the part 2 of this, which I call shameless plugging. I think this is the real reason why I'm doing this for everybody, is because, you know what, if people don't know where to find you or what you have, you're never going to be out there for anybody. So question number 1, what books of poetry or otherwise do you currently have on the market, and where can people find them?
I have Through This Door and Touchstone are available on Amazon. I write under Nancy M. Bell only because there's another author with my name.
I saw that.
Because it's pretty common. So I stick my middle initial in there so that hopefully people can find me better. I also am published by BWL Publishing, which is an Alberta publisher. I have, and again, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, all your normal places. You can also go to the website, which is bwlpublishing.ca. And down the side will be all the authors listed. If you click on mine, it takes you to my page where all my books are listed, and there are bylinks attached to each cover. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of where I am. I have, I think, over 20 novels published right now, genre fiction, a little bit of historical romance, some contemporary romance, some YA books that deal with fantasy. Laurel's Quest is a fantasy set in Cornwall, following earth energy lines and different things, and full of mythology and different things along with the story. So there's, if you just go either any of those places, you will find me. Okay, fair enough. Good. And so your most current poetry book is Touchstone? Yes. Excellent. Are you currently working on anything? And if so, how close is it to completion? I am working on putting another book of poetry together, but life has gotten in the way recently, just because of other commitments. I was commissioned to write a Canadian historical mystery set in Manitoba by the publisher. So I've been kind of working on that at the moment, set during sort of the time period of the Rebellion.
Okay.
So that's supposed to be coming out in September of 2024, I believe. So hopefully my poetry book gets out before that. I don't even have a name for the poetry book yet, but I have to come up with something yet. But
how do you select your poetry book names?
it depends. Touchstone is actually the title of a poem I wrote for my first horse. Okay. And through this door is actually a title of the poem, and it's sort of life's journey almost. It's really short, but it's basically you walk through this door alone when you're born, and when you leave this life, you also walk through that door alone. And that's where that through this door came from.
Okay. But there's many doors in between that lets people in and out as well.
There are. Exactly. So it's, that's what those two just basically came from the poem that sort of inspired me to put the book together.
Okay. That's fair enough. Are titles easy for you to come by?
Usually.
For poetry or books?
Usually, but not always. Poetry is a little bit easier maybe because there aren't so many books. Like if you trying to find a title for a novel, you have to kind of go to Amazon and different places and type in the title that you're thinking of, because if there's a million other books with that title, then you got to rethink it.
Yeah. Because
nobody's ever going to find you.
What's that called? Keyword searches or whatever?
Yeah, I just type the title in the search bar and see what
and go from there. Yeah. There's a science to that apparently, but I don't have the time, and I've never been one for science.
No, there's all those algorithm things, and
you know what? I've got no rhythm of any kind, whether it's algo or not. If you had to choose one of your poems or books as a favorite, which one would it be and why?
If I had to choose a book, it would be Laurel's Quest, only because that's the very first novel I ever got published. And I wrote it when I was recovering from my catastrophic accident. For poetry, I actually like the poems in Through This Door better, but I would probably say Touchstone only because it's dedicated to my first horse.
And it's the newer one.
It is the newer one, yes.
Well, I think I heard a quote. I'm not sure who it's by, but they were asked, what's your favorite book that you've written? And they say anything that I've recently released. And that's fair enough for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where can people connect with you? Facebook, email, snail mail, TikTok, Instagram, and I don't know any of the newer ones, so I'm not even going to go there.
Well, yes, old dog, new tricks here. I'm on Facebook as author Nancy M. Bell. You can find me on the BWL Publishing website.
Which is?
bwlpublishing.ca.
Okay.
I don't have TikTok. I don't have Instagram. Sorry, guys. Snapchat, none of those. My email is actually my horse's name and her daddy's name, so it's spelt really weird. It's Emily and then PIKKASSO @gmail.com.
Okay.
And I'm in my email every day. So I usually, if I get hear from anybody, I always answer them because I'm, just happy that somebody thought enough to reach out and say, hey.
Exactly. There will be transcripts available of this show. And if you do want a transcript, just email the show at randy.btlpodcast@gmail.com, and we'd be more than happy to get a transcript out to you. I noticed that you do not have an author page on Amazon.
I should have.
Nope.
I do. I'm on Author Central.
Are you? Because when I went to, when I went to Amazon this morning before coming to talk to you, it did not give me the option of going to your author page.
Oh, bad Amazon. I will have to look at that because I do have an author page on Author Central.
Okay, so do I. But I just thought I'd bring that up to you.
Yeah, I will go harass Amazon after.
What's going on?
I do have an author page. Okay,
well, good. So if you're on Amazon, look her up on her author page, because I actually went into, typed your name out, and then I saw a list of books, but not on an author page.
Oh, isn't that weird?
Yeah. Can you share one final poem with us?
Sure. Just let me find it here.
It's right there.
Somewhere, yes. I even put a marker in there and I still can't find it. Actually, I'll share Henge because, that was the one that got in Tamarack, so I'm pretty proud of this one.
Okay.
It's called Henge. They raised the stones with music and starfire, orchestrated in the bright moonlight of the longest day. Hundreds of ranks of trained bards and mages in their own right, ranged around the plain, one rank for each set of uprights and lintel. One master to lead and direct their shimmering energies. One master to control the power that sets the lintel gently atop the uprights. The power of their music hangs brilliant in the moonlight air, shimmering and coalescing over the plain. The granite stones pulse warmly and glow as they move and dance into place. It is done. The master turns and bows to welcome the sun this morning of the longest day. The ranks of bards bow and raise shining eyes as the sun bathes them in the first flush of dawn light. The master smiles. The stones settle into their beds, and the sun's rays shine true, locking the stones in place. The song rises with the sun, blooming from the bards, from the granite stone itself. The god and goddess dance across the lintel stones. And that was inspired because I read somewhere in some research somewhere that there was a theory that they had raised the stones for Stonehenge and moved them with the power of musical vibrations.
I've read that too.
And it also leads into that they used to have the I can't remember the name of them, the choirs that were set at certain places around Britain, and each choir would intone a single note, and then at the portals of the year, they would all come together and intone them all together, and it was part of the Golden Age theory.
Yep.
Where they would empower the energy lines of Britain. Otherwise
known as ley lines?
Ley lines and earth energy lines, telluric energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of where that poem came from.
Excellent. But you didn't explain in your poem, or maybe you don't have an answer to offer, but is how these stones stay there. Because the sun still comes up and the power is still there, and no,
they're just bedded there. That's where they live.
So what will remove them, or what will knock them over? I guess time and people, right?
Well, mostly people.
Mostly people.
That's what happened at Avebury, because they broke a bunch of the stones in the 18th and early 19th century and used them to build buildings.
Yeah, well, that was a thing, though.
Yep, and that's what happened to parts of Glastonbury Abbey as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are pieces of it in buildings around Glastonbury.
Not surprising, I guess. Use what you can where you can, right?
Well, and it fell into disrepair. There's not much of it left, really.
I would love to, you know what? I'm going to go and get a piece of the Blarney Stone then.
There you go.
There you go.
Chip a piece off while you're kissing it.
You know what? I'm not being hung upside down to kiss nothing.
No, me neither. I'd be all good.
In closing, already, can you believe that?
No.
In closing, what would you tell anyone who might be too afraid to take the chance on being published, either traditionally or self-published?
Or self-published. Really, what, other than, dealing with rejection, what is there to be afraid of, really? Like, if we believe in what the words we put on the paper, and we believe that they're, legitimate, and that, we haven't stolen them from someone else, and that they have merit, then why not share it with the world? And maybe what you have to say or what you've put on paper isn't profound to you. Maybe it's just, something that came to you and you slapped it down and kind of molded it a bit and sent it out. But maybe it's what somebody somewhere needs to hear. And this is just the universe acting through you to get that message out to whoever needs to hear it.
Which kind of goes to what I said earlier, is I don't necessarily write because I have something to say, but rather because you may have something you need to hear.
Yes, exactly. And, rejection is just rejection. It's just one person's opinion at the time they happen to look at your submission. So they might have 20 emails or they might have, no, I don't think very many people actually have a physical slush pile anymore, but most of it is digital slush pile now.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they're having a bad day and your poem just didn't hit them, or maybe your topic just isn't something that appeals to them, but it doesn't mean that the next person who you send it to isn't going to go, oh my God, I love this.
Or perhaps what you've written has hit them in such a profound way that it bothered them.
Yes. Yeah.
There's that too. But what you say is absolutely correct. And, if you don't put it out there, then you might not be helping that one person who needs it.
Yeah. And I think poetry, words that are gifted to us from wherever, we create them in our little heads and they come from somewhere. It's a gift and we should be sharing that gift with whoever wants to partake of it, basically.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. I'm going to sound like an athlete here. 110%. Nancy, this has been fun, enlightening. And I really appreciate that you took the time out of your morning. It's morning for us because we're
yes, it is
down the road from each other. But thank you for agreeing to do this. Thank you for coming up coming on and doing this. And, I really, appreciate it. And I hope that the listening audience were able to, get something out of this, or at least discover you.
Well, thank you for having me on. It was great. It was lots of fun, and it's always fun to talk poetry and writing and wherever that leads us, because often it kind of takes you little side roads that are really interesting and enlightening.
One last question. Collaboration. Have you ever collaborated with anybody on a poem, or a poem, not a book, but a poem?
I have tried.
Okay. And how did that work?
Well, it's still a work in progress, sort of. I wrote a poem about Avebury at Beltane, May 1st, May Day. And my girlfriend, who is a super accomplished pianist, was going to set it to music.
Okay.
And we went back and forth, and she kept wanting me to change things. And so I'd change this thing, and then she'd say, no, now you changed the whatever. And I'm like, well, I only do what I thought you wanted me to do. So it's a work in progress.
I write words. I don't write song or words for music.
No. And music is very mathematical, which is really interesting.
It's a different beast altogether.
Yeah. Like she can actually compose music through math, which I find really, astounding, because it's all, timing and fourths and eighths and I don't know what all else, because I'm a really bad guitarist, and that's as far as my musicianship goes. But yeah, that was our collaboration. It was called The Singing Stones, it was called, but they have not been sung yet.
Oh. They're waiting, eh?
They are still waiting, yes.
Nancy, thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Between the Lines. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and were inspired to either start writing or to keep on writing. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for future episodes or guests, you can reach out to us by sending an email to randy.btlpodcast@gmail.com. Use comment or suggestion in the subject line. For a copy of the transcript of this or any other episode, just send us an email using transcript as the subject line and indicate which season and episode you would like a transcript for. Visit my website, therandylacey.ca, where you can purchase one of my books, read my blog, and yes, even hear every episode of this podcast. If you have enjoyed what you've heard and would like to hear more, click the Buy Me a Coffee button at the top right corner of the page to help cover the costs associated with keeping this show available to you. If you're ever feeling overwhelmed by the many lions in your life, take a deep breath and remember the wise words of Winnie the Pooh. Sometimes the smallest things take up the most room in your heart. Until next time, keep on keeping between the lines.